During the Stalin era, people were afraid to say anything. It's interesting to note that activists today and activists back then are similar.
Back then, there were a small group of renegades, as they were called by Soviet officials. What the officials did not say was that issues of human rights and other freedoms concerned many different people. Among them were nuclear scientist Sakharov and worker Marchenko, biologist Kovalyov and General Grigorenko, poet Gorbanevskaya and writer Daniel. We'll try to talk about each of them. How serious of a problem was it for the Soviet system to confront the dissident movement?
It was one of the problems, but definitely not the major one.
Valery Shirayev, assistant director of the Novaya Gazeta newspaper, former major of the KGB reserves.
In Russia, in the waning days of the Soviet Union, the majority of incarcerated people were not Democrats, and were not those who fought the system to change it. No, they were almost all nationalists, Ukrainian nationalists, Uzbek, and so on. These were the nationalists. The Baltic states, those were the real problems. Those were the dissidents. A whole group of nationalistic intelligentsia wanted to build nationalistic governments. There were very few of those who were fighting communism. Very, very few.
In the 1960s, the slogan of the modern protesters was born, "Obey your constitution." It is attributed to Alexander Yesenin-Volpin. I wonder if the Russian government today hears the voice of its people.
All our opponents are for a state based on the rule of law. But what is a law-abiding state? The one that observes current laws. What does the current law say about demonstrations? You have to have the permission of local authorities. If you have it, go, march and demonstrate. If not, you do not have the right. If you demonstrated without permission, be ready to be clubbed on the head. That's all.
Article 31 of the Constitution states, citizens of the Russian Federation shall have the right to gather peacefully without weapons and to hold meetings, rallies, demonstrations, marches and pickets. The reality is driven by the subjective judgments of those who have had first-hand experience with the subject.
For all intents and purposes, in Russia today, troikas are reborn.
Irik Murtazin, former spokesperson for the President of Tatarstan from 1999 to 2002. In November 2009, he was found guilty of slander and stirring up hatred between social classes. He was sentenced to 1 year and 9 months in a maximum security prison camp. Journalist at the Novaya Gazeta newspaper.
То есть были сталинские тройки, сегодня возрождены уже тройки российских времен, потому что...
We had troikas in Stalin's time. Now we have modern Russian troikas. The judge, the prosecutor, and the state-appointed lawyer. The state-appointed lawyer, the lawyer on call, first of all tries to convince his or her client to plead guilty and agree to a special trial procedure, that is, without the examination of evidence. When you realize that verdicts today are rubber-stamped within 15-20 minutes, is it really different from what troikas did?
Those who have already faced Soviet courts and spent time in special psychiatric facilities say that modern protesters are making a number of mistakes. Honestly, it would be strange if they did not.
One should never say that as a result of the protest on Revolution Square, the regime will fall. The Kremlin's walls will fall. That's a joke.
Valeria Novodvorskaya, politician, dissident, founder of the Democratic Union Party. From 1970 to 72, underwent treatment in a specialized psychiatric hospital in the city of Kazan.
If our governments are so frightened, then the protests are not for them, but for the people. And as for the people, they should not laugh when they see such protests. I would not advise to throw rocks at the special forces. The rocks will not create any real damage for them, but will create lots of trouble for us. They will say, extremists called for a rebellion and they built a barricade. To start an Orange Revolution, you need adequate forces and certain conditions among the people. And even then, success is not guaranteed. One should not call a march of millions demonstration that actually has 10,000 participants. The opposition should not be a source of derision. It has to be squeaky clean and noble. It should have a reasonable goal.
The slogan "Obey your constitution" is still relevant today. The need is still there to analyze the sources of confrontation between society and government, to look for parallels and possible solutions.
Наверное, сегодняшняя ситуация в том, что как на
There's a similarity between the Soviet government's view and today's Russian government's view of the constitution. Both see the document as a mere formality, used only as a decoration for foreign countries.
Garry Kasparov, former world chess champion, political activist, commentator.
That's why the slogan is still almost as effective today as it was then. It gives you a feeling of moral righteousness, but of course has no practical results. The court verdicts that were rubber-stamped 40 years ago and the ones that are rubber-stamped today are quite anti-constitutional, and the executive branch today has similar authoritarian characteristics. The difference is that back then it was a one-party dictatorship, while today it is more like the dictatorship of one particular person.
The conversation about similarities between modern and past protests needs some reinterpretation. The right to make such changes belongs to people who made clear their position more than 40 years ago.
We demanded, obey your laws.
Sergei Kovalev, dissident, in exile from 1974 to 1984. First human rights ombudsman from 1984 to 1995. Recipient of many international human rights awards. Chair of Russian Civil Rights Society, Memorial.
Они тоже требуют, хватит врать. Сейчас в протестном движении...
They also made the demand, stop lying. Right now, at the center of the protests movement, there are real politicians.
Настоящие политики, ну, не сказал бы...
I would not say they're of a high caliber, but there are people who approve and use traditional practices. They may exaggerate sometimes or may not inform their supporters of the leaders' real plans. Our resistance was different. We never thought about political consequences. We thought about the right of self-respect.
There is a lot worth talking about concerning the dissident movement of the second half of the 20th century. Some good, some bad. Often the events of more than 40 years ago echo today. You're watching Parallels, Events, People. I am Natella Baltyanska.
I was born and raised in Ukraine, and I came here when I was 14 years old to pursue an American dream. I was always creating stuff since I was a little child. All of the walls were painted, my notepads were painted, everything, everywhere I could paint, I always did. Like there's always doodles, and in every single book I was reading. I started by doing face painting, and I was doing it for about a year or two. I'm the type of person that I always like to take it to the next level. It's like, okay, what's next? What's next? You know, I'm already done with face painting, now what? And I went to a face and body art convention in Florida, and I saw that people were doing body painting, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so exciting. It's so much better than just face painting, because now I can do all my art with the body painting as well, and that's how body painting came along. I definitely had my body painted quite a few times, And one of the main reasons why I decided to do that is because I wanted to know what it feels like for the model to be painted, because for me it's very comfortable as humanly possible. And in order for me to understand that better, I chose to be on the other end of the brush so I can learn this experience. Initially, when I was exposed to this career, my parents did not support me at all. They wanted me to be a lawyer, a doctor. I'm actually the first person in my family that does not have a college degree. But at the same time, I'm the most successful one out of my whole family. When I pick up a brush, it almost like I'm getting into my own zone, in my own little world, my comfort zone. Very often my models try to talk to me throughout the process, but it's so hard for me to even keep up a conversation because I'm so focused about what I'm doing, and I'm so inspired that it totally takes me out of this world. It's almost like a drug. I have moments in my life that I get focused on one particular design or color. A few years ago, I got my first car, and everything had to be zebra. Like even my dog was not allowed in the car unless he was dressed up in a zebra outfit. And now, as I purchased my first house, everything in my house is colored teal. Everything. I am a huge fan of Tom Jones. What's new, pussycat? Whoa, 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 whoa. Oh my God. Okay, so that's how obsessed I am. For some reason, for some really weird reason, inspires me. When I wake up in the morning and I turn on his music, nothing else matters. What I do for a living, it makes me happy. I feel like I have not worked a day of my life. I feel like America gave me an opportunity to pursue my passion as an artist. And I'm pretty sure I won't be able to succeed in the art field that I'm in if I would be back in Ukraine. It's a great feeling. It's a great feeling to do what you love.
VOA presents the following National Geographic program as we continue to explore the world around us.
Illegal logging, according to Interpol, makes up about 15 to 90% of the logging in the rainforest worldwide. It's true that deforestation alone counts for more carbon emissions than all transportation, all the cars, trucks, trains, boats, planes combined. In the summer of 2011, I visited the forests of Borneo, the rainforest of Borneo, for the very first time. And as you can imagine, it was the overwhelming sound that really struck me the most. But there were some things that actually stuck out from this cacophony. This is a hornbill. This is a cicada. And this is a family of gibbons that's singing to each other over a great distance. This was not something we were aware of, but in the background of the sound, this overwhelming cacophony, is the sound of chainsaws. And in fact, if you turn down the sound of the forest, there was actually a chainsaw noise behind that the entire time. It's very, very hard to know where illegal logging is taking place, even over a short distance of the forest, because it's such a loud place and because it's such a dense place that you can't move through so easily. I think you have to realize that it's hard for people in the field. There's a lot of sincere people out there who are trying to fight deforestation, but it's not easy to know where it's happening at all times. And having real-time knowledge of this is pretty important. So here's this idea, right? The moment that a chainsaw goes off in the forest, a computer, a device is able to pick up the sound, pick it out of the rainforest chainsaw, send an alert to local authorities who can show up in real time and halt the loggers. The most important part of the equation are the people who can actually show up and respond, who've taken the risk of being there to actually stop it. But the amazing thing is that there's sometimes pretty good connectivity. There's cell phone service out in the middle of the forest, particularly on the periphery. Out there's no electricity, no running water, no roads for hundreds of miles in some cases. But they were all on their cell phones. The people in the villages were surfing Facebook. They're on the web. They charge their phones on a generator at night. and then they do the same thing the next day. And so there's pretty good cell phone service. But you need a device, right? And so we're talking about cell phones. What can cell phones do? I mean, what can't cell phones do these days, right? So cell phones are fantastic little computers. They're everywhere. We probably all have them in our pockets right now. And they're a fantastic development platform. There's hundreds of millions of developers who are willing to use it. You have to protect it from the elements of the rainforest, so you put it in a box. There's a powerful microphone on it, and you do have to put some solar panels on it to make sure it can stay powered, which is actually the hardest part, because under a tree canopy is pretty dark. This is actually what it looks like all put together. This is the prototype. There's a phone inside that box, and you're able to listen to the sounds of the forest. This is me sort of putting it all together just to show you guys how simple it really actually can be. But you have to test it in the field. So we took it back to Indonesia, this time on the island of Sumatra. And somewhat to a surprise, on the second day, we were able to pick up the sounds of chainsaws and send a real-time alert to myself and to the rangers that were there. We took off to go see where this was. This is the moment where we've just sort of walked through the forest and really not sure if this has been the best idea altogether. There's supposed to be loggers on the other side. I'm sort of kind of regretting this into, oh God, he's moving. I gotta go, I gotta follow him. Okay, so we get over the hill, and on the other side, managed to catch some loggers in the act. And our partners there talked them down. Nobody had to be arrested. They actually were acquaintances of the people that run the reserve. And like, oh, we didn't know that this was on there. So they were able to leverage this. These partners, they're so fantastic. They were able to leverage this to diffuse the situation. And according to them, the loggers have not been back to that area since. And so as far as they're concerned, this was very effective. But the question is, how do we pick it out? Look, it needs to be automatic. There's sometimes people think that it's about perhaps people listening on the phone to the forest and looking for the sounds of chainsaws. It's not really feasible to expect people to pick the sounds out even. But computers are really, really good at it. On the top, you see data from Sumatra, the exact test. This is the event that we were able to respond to. This is at almost a kilometer away from where the device is throughout the cacophony of the forest. But there's these peaks, these 4 little bumps, and those represent these the signal of the chainsaw, which really does not belong in the forest. So it looks kind of like this. This is not cutting-edge science. This is really old-school data analysis. And you can see that this is much closer than 1 kilometer, but you can see these peaks that show up. And even as the peaks move around back and forth, they're always the same distance away. That's something a computer can pick out pretty easily. Based on this, if you can pick up the sounds of chainsaws at 1 kilometer away, then you can perhaps set them up around the periphery of a reserve and protect up to 2 kilometers inward, especially because the periphery of the reserve is the most likely to have cell phone service. We thought this was pretty exciting, so we shared the news with the world, and people came to us and said, "Hey, we can use this elsewhere." The first one was our partner, Zoological Society of London, who invited us to Africa to do it, and they had an even better idea in picking up chainsaws. They said to us, "Look, there's this FSC concession here. There's about 2/3 of it in the south that is under threat from illegal logging and poaching, but there's one access road. There's just one road that people use to get in and out." So you could blanket the entire surface in cell phones, which doesn't seem very feasible, or you could just set them up along this road, and if only your system could detect vehicles, then you could know the moment that loggers come in and out or poachers go in and out. All of it goes through this one gate. This is in Cameroon, and working with an FSC-certified company that's responsible for protecting this area as part of their certification. These are the guys that man the gate, and you can see behind them all of these animals that are there, these animals that they're responsible for protecting, including elephants, chimpanzees, and gorillas. But it was known that there was a decent amount of legal logging taking place there. So we set up our system along the road and trained it to pick out the sounds of motorcycles. And you can see the same sort of system applies with these peaks and being able to pick them out. moving from Africa to the Amazon. And on the outskirts of the Amazon, you have this ocean of deforestation with these little islands of forest. Like, what's going on with that? Well, those are indigenous. They're lands that have been maintained by the indigenous people and are recognized by the government. And somehow, that's seeming to work. So you move down here. This is the Tembe Reserve. The area to the south is a different tribe. There's about 1,500 of them left. Most of their villages are in the north and the south edge. This was pristine virgin rainforest just a few decades ago, but the middle area is under constant threat from illegal logging, sometimes 10 logging trucks at a time, settling, and also drug plantations are there as well. So we spoke to our partners to the Tembe, and they said this vigilance program, this program of driving people out of their land could use a technological edge. These are the Tembe. They believe that they are currently on their last stand for the survival of their entire race, and it is sort of, the way forward or annihilation. Fortunately for that, they are well organized as of late. They are well armed, and they're very motivated to fight back against the drug smugglers and illegal loggers. So we're working with the chiefs in the village in the north and the south because, again, it's always about using what's already there. In the case of Africa, there was a cell tower right smack dab next to the reserve. But in Brazil, we don't have that. There is infrastructure. There's cell phone towers. So this is huge. This is a 6,000 square kilometer reserve. And so these cell phone sort of points of access that you see here are actually up to 50, 60 kilometers away from the areas that are most under threat, which made this next part pretty important. So being up in the trees was important because it allowed us to do things like this.
Just sitting up here in the tree while it drains away. Down there. About 120 feet up. But pretty amazing thing is that if you look at signal up there, oh, well, that one's not very good. Look at the signal up there. We got cell phone service. Thanks to this huge parabolic antenna that we got, which is picking up a signal from about 30 kilometers away here in Brazil, in the Tembe territory. So.
Okay, so they don't all need those antennas. I'll point that out. But that one actually was able to pick up a signal from 30 kilometers away. We were able to repeat the same experiment at 50 kilometers, meaning that we can really push the limits of where this system is able to potentially work. I just got back here this weekend from the Tembe Reserve, and 1 week ago, this is last Friday, we became aware that there were vehicles moving through one of the areas where we set up a device. It was some of the illegal settlers who came back. They noticed that we'd been there. They burned.
This is Border Crossings. My name is Larry London, and I'll be your host for today's show as we welcome a music star from the 1980s, whose hits include Every Time I Think of You, Change, Back on My Feet Again, and of course, the #1 song, Missing You. John Waite's name might not be easily recognizable, but his smash hits and his unique vocal styling certainly are. From his days with Bad English and the Babies, to his own solo recordings, John Waite has toured with Ringo Starr and many other music giants. John's music has topped the US and UK charts, and he's on tour today, and he joins us for a live performance and interview. Stay tuned for John Waite on today's Border Crossings.
I put my heart on hold.
Hi, this is Larry London. Welcome to Border Crossings, and what a great show we've got for you today. I'm very excited myself because I'm a fan of this man and his music over the years, going back as far as the 70s. And we welcome to D.C. and to Border Crossings and to the worldwide VOA audience, John Waite. Welcome to our studios.
Oh, it's great to be here, Larry. Thanks.
It's a pleasure to meet you in person. I have been playing your songs with the Babies and with Bad English for many, many years. And
so have I.
So have you. Probably many more times, I'm sure, than I have. But I love the songs. I love your music.
Thanks.
I love your sound and everything that you've been putting out. And are you on tour now for a new album?
There's a greatest hits called Best. And there's like 12 songs that span the whole career. That's just come out, that's in the shops. And we got one called Wooden Heart Volume 2, which is like a retrospective. It's an acoustic anthology. And Missing You's on there, Isn't It Time, some of the really big songs, and then some of the obscure songs from past albums that are acoustic. It's an amalgam of like new cuts and old cuts. But it's a beautiful record. It came out of nowhere. It only took a day and a half to record the 6 songs that are on the 12 tracks. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was going in there to cut 4 tracks for an EP, because the Volume 1 was an EP. And it became 6 tracks, and then I just added these other tracks in, and it was this album. But it's like, it's Spartan, it's stripped down. Sometimes it's just me and one guitar. A lot of it is just me and one guitar. But it's got something that I didn't expect it to have, and it's really kind of an experience listening to it. It really surprises me. It happens so fast.
What's the vibe on the new album? I know you've kind of evolved over your career, and for a while it was rock, and then you did a little bluegrass, and you worked with Alison Krauss. So, you know, where's the new sound for these days?
Well, no, I started off on the acoustic. You know, I really did. My cousin Michael Deegan, he's with the Temperance 7, which is a trad jazz band in England that were big in the 50s and stuff, but he's the banjo player. And when I was a kid, he was a painter who went to art school, but he'd play me Jimmy Rogers songs and Hank Williams and Big Bill Broonzy, and it all came from this national big acoustic guitar with a resonator, and then he would play like acoustic. But I grew up listening to that before I heard rock and roll. So when I look back to the key things that motivate me musically, it's always on the acoustic guitar. Even as far back as the Babies, the best songs were all written on the acoustic. And left to my own devices, I would play like country or folk or Celtic music or blues. But country blues, not so much electric blues like Chicago blues, it'd be Delta, you know? So it all comes from this. And as I got older, especially when I got out of Bad English, when that broke up, I went straight back to the acoustic. It was so natural. I was living in New York City, and the reason for playing the acoustic at that point, other than just I loved it, was that you couldn't make a lot of racket at 2 in the morning. You know, people would knock on the doors and you'd get evicted, you know, so I had the acoustic with me all the time. But it spoke to me, and it always has. And so at this point in my life, when I don't need to sort of do anything other than what I want to do, you know, this is what I'm doing now. It's just gone back to what I loved as a kid.
What's the name of the new album?
It's called Acoustic Anthology, Wooden Heart Volume 2.
Excellent. Well, and that leads me to believe there's going to be Volume 3.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm already thinking about that. We got some downtime in November and December, and there's so many songs, you know. I mean, I've got some of the songs that I want to recut from the Babies, like You. There's songs that are just beautiful songs I'd like to sort of update and just bring out without any orchestration or, like, backbeat. Just the acoustic, it speaks so truly, you know. I want to get back to that. And there's new songs I've written, and all of the new songs are like on the acoustic, but they're kind of rock songs. It's not like I'm country, but I'm influenced by country. The intention of country is like storytelling, and I've always had that. I've always been able to like tell a story in a song, and I didn't realize till recently that's where it came from. It's really an honest acquisition, you know. It's like something that happened to me as a kid. Cowboy songs, you know, Marty Robbins. They're all story songs, you know. So the natural thing for me to do is tell stories. But it works on the acoustic, not so much on the electric.
Yeah, there's not many storytelling guitar-based bands these days. I mean, you know, you have an artist like Ed Sheeran, for example.
Yeah.
He tells stories, plays the guitar. So it's
you get
great.
it in country. You get it in country and you get it in bluegrass. But in rock's something else.
Yes.
Rock, unless you like Bob Seger, who can like... and obviously Bruce Springsteen.
Right.
There are people that really own that.
The legends,
Bob Dylan. You know, I mean, Dylan's like the, you know, he's Dylan. There's only one Dylan, and he's the boss.
We've got John Waite in our studios on tour for album 11. And
is it?
I guess you're not counting anymore.
No, I was. I thought it was more like 20, actually.
It feels like it, huh?
No, it's 20. Oh, wow, the solo records, it's 11. But if you put Bad English in there and the
That's
Babies,
true. It's
it gets to like
20.
20 or 21.
Yeah, and
it's
40
insane.
years, right? 40
yeah,
plus
more
years.
than 40 years. I think somebody's trying to make me look good, but I said it's 40 years. It's more like 43 or something, you know?
Well, you look great.
Oh, thank you.
And introduce the guys in the band.
On the stool.
On the stool?
Yeah, we couldn't bring a drum kit. They couldn't fit it